Jason Johnson, president of the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund, also former deputy commissioner with the Baltimore Police Department. Thank you so much for jumping on here. We want to talk with you about what we now know is a fatal officer-involved shooting that happened yesterday evening. Now that police have confirmed the suspect has died, how, if at all, does this change the nature of the investigation?
Well, the biggest way it will change is that now the investigation will be led by the Maryland, also the Attorney General Independent Investigations Division, who statutorily is responsible for conducting the investigation of all fatal police-involved encounters. Typically, would not investigate a non-fatal encounter. Now, as fatal, they'll lead the investigation. Other than that, it remains more or less the same. The officers' duty status will be the same, and the investigation will conduct and will proceed in the ordinary course, regardless.
Commissioner Richard Worley held a press conference following the shooting outside Shock Trauma. We know the officer who was shot is there now. According to the commissioner, officers were patrolling the area and said the man was showing signs of being armed. We know the department has DAT teams, those district action teams that are often tasked with this. And often we're seeing these officers involved in officer-involved shootings.
Yeah, correct. Those are the officers that are they're not necessarily responsible for responding to 911 calls that keep patrol officers really busy. They're able to focus their attention really on the areas in which they're face the biggest challenges with respect to crime, and their mandate is to look for people who are suspected of being involved in criminal activity currently, or who are planning future activities, or even people that they know that have open warrants, that have significant criminal histories. But frequently, they're the ones that are able to observe people and observe their characteristics. There are certain characteristics that people tend to display when they are carrying a firearm, sometimes even unbeknownst to them. There's things like bulges and just the way that one carries themselves, and sometimes you can even visibly see the outline of a firearm in a pocket or something like that. A lot of people who haven't been trained to do it and don't think that way may not even notice it, but these officers are particularly focused on those sorts of things. And when they see someone that they believe is armed, they will approach them and conduct an interview. Sometimes actually conduct a pat down if they have reasonable suspicion that the person is armed.
Now,
Seems like that's what happened. The commissioner didn't provide any real specifics, but of course, in the very early stages, after something like this happens, oftentimes you don't know the specifics. What they do have access to that is really kind of new in the last decade or so is oftentimes the commissioners and the senior leadership are able to actually view body-worn camera footage before they even make any public statements about an incident like that. It seems like the commissioner did have the opportunity to do that. So it really helps in the early stages to be able to put out information instead of speculating, to actually know a few things before you address the media and the public. And it seems like that's what Commissioner Worley did in this case.
throughout the press conference, the commissioner talked about issues with the crowd. This happened near the Upton Metro Station, a very busy area. The commissioner said the crowd was running behind the officers during the pursuit, the foot pursuit, and then prevented the officers from rendering aid to the man after he was shot. Can you talk about how dangerous of a situation this became for the officers? According to the commissioner, there were multiple signal 13s.
Yeah, you can even see some of the footage that's out on social media. You can see the immediate aftermath after the shooting happened. There were not too many officers on the scene. It looked like they were outnumbered by a crowd that had followed officers even on the foot pursuit, and then later, I won't say surrounded them, but certainly were in the same vicinity. People emotions were running really high, even though it's unclear whether the members of the public really knew what happened, or maybe that didn't even matter. But clearly, they were confrontational with the police, and the police were outnumbered. So certainly a very dangerous situation from the very beginning. You can imagine officers are engaged in a pursuit probably for a fairly brief period. But not only do they have to be concerned with the person in front of them who they believe to be armed and who in fact sounds like was in fact armed, but they also had to worry about another crowd of people behind them, and you can't monitor everything at one time, and it's just really dangerous for those officers. And I think that's one of the things that body worn cameras brings us, is eventually they will release these body worn cameras so that the public in general can get a sense of real challenges these officers face, not just in this incident, but really on a daily basis, constantly being confronted by angry crowds and oftentimes crowds that don't even know what's going on. They just know they're angry at the police, and that really presents a challenge to law enforcement.
Yes, and according to the commissioner, not only was the suspect armed, but fired at the officers first. Can you talk about why the officers were likely unable to immediately render aid, as the commissioner said they attempted to, why it was so dangerous for them to be able to do so? Police said that they also located the suspect's weapon on scene too, so that was still there, according to the commissioner.
Ordinarily, after whenever police encounter a person that's injured, especially if it's someone who was injured by the police, which is what happened in this case, there was an exchange of gunfire, and police would, notwithstanding those circumstances, would render aid to the person because they've been injured. If you're surrounded by a large and angry crowd, you're really probably not going to be able to do that, because your attention, instead of being able to focus on providing aid to the person, you're going to be distracted and concerned about your own safety because you have a crowd of angry people around you. It sounds like that's what happened in this case. I'm confident that when the body worn camera is released, that's going to be much more clear, really, for everyone to see the circumstances of what happened. I mean, I could already tell just by looking at a video filmed by a citizen who was actually probably part of that angry crowd, but then posted that video on social media. All of this information is going to be very important in the investigation by the Attorney General and later by the BPD and its administrative investigation, both the body-worn camera and also videos that are being posted. They do not reflect well, in my opinion, on the crowd. And from what I've seen, it did reflect very positively on BPD and what it did.
What do you believe this encounter communicates about the current state of relations between police and the public here in Baltimore?
Yeah, it's strained, and frankly, in that area, that part of town, it has been for a long time. So it's not really new. It's really kind of unfortunate when you think about that. BPD is, 10 almost 10 years into a consent decree. By all accounts that we hear from the court and otherwise, BPD is doing well. It's progressing. It's checking off all the boxes for the consent decree. I mean, it's been a number of years, but given that, you would think that public trust generally should be much higher, and you shouldn't have these situations where crowds are following police officers on foot pursuits and then, without knowing any of the facts, really becoming confrontational and oppositional to the police. That was really what the consent decree was supposed to do, was to win back public confidence broadly, and so that everyone would, have confidence in the police, the ability of the police to follow the law, follow the Constitution, follow their own internal rules, and also to be able to evaluate its own performance, such as incidents like this. And it doesn't look like, it looks like there's large swaths of the public, at least in that specific area, who are not confident in that, notwithstanding 10 years into a consent decree. So it makes you kind of wonder, is the consent decree doing what it was supposed to do, and in terms of public confidence?
We know the investigation is in the hands of the Attorney General's office. I've reached out to Baltimore Police. A spokesperson confirmed the department will release the body-worn camera footage in according with its policy. Would you say it'd be beneficial sooner than later in terms of a timeline on this release when it comes to police and public relations?
Yeah, I think so. Of course, the police department has reasons for not immediately releasing it that relate to the investigation. They have to sort of collaborate with the Attorney General's office now. There will be a release. I'm confident of that. I do hope that when it is released, that has sometimes become custom, that some senior member of the police department will address the media, specifically walk the media and the public through the video. Perhaps there are different angles to show. It's going to, it perhaps will involve what caused the police to initially focus on this person, the characteristics of an armed person, or whatever it was that attracted officers' attention, the pursuit itself, and then, of course, the confrontation that resulted in an exchange of gunfire. But then also the crowd and what role the crowd played in the immediate aftermath. Here we're talking about not being able to render aid to the person potentially, and also evidence. You know, you get a big crowd. These cases, these crime scenes are scrutinized more than any other type of crime scene. Whenever police are involved in a use of deadly force, everything about the scene is scrutinized, carefully documented, etc. It's fortunate that the gun apparently remained on the scene, because that's the other thing you worry about is if you have a crowd take over the immediate crime scene, how are they going to change the crime scene, and will they change the crime scene? It will be in a way that makes it very difficult to determine what led to this. Doesn't sound like that happened, but that's always a concern.
Jason Johnson, former Deputy Commissioner with the Baltimore Police Department, thank you so much for your insight on this case.
Yeah, thank you for having me.